Good morning, everyone. It is time for the Merkel Retirement Minute, as we have in studio with us Loren Merkel to give you some advice about how to keep those nickels and dimes in your bank account rather than someone else's.
Absolutely, but also about leaving a legacy and making sure you have that in place, ready to go. And you can think about this at any time in your life, so why not right now? Loren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so when we're talking about leaving a legacy, what exactly are we saying?
Well, this is not necessarily a fun topic to think about, because what we're talking about here is when we pass away.
Right.
When we pass away, whatever we have left over, how do we get it to our loved ones and our charities in the most efficient way possible? And unfortunately, there's a lot of mistakes that take place within the legacy plan. There's a number of different strategies that we can use. We can use a will, we can use a trust, we can just use how we title our accounts to get it to the next generation. So there's just a lot of questions, and this is one of those things that has to be done right before we pass, because once we pass, we can't fix it.
Yeah, you can't go back and correct it after time has expired, after the expiration date comes. But question is, when you select different methods of distributing your items that you have left over, are there different tax implications to each one of those?
There can be, depending upon what types of accounts that you leave or what types of property that you leave. There's something called step up and cost basis, and that's pretty technical. But basically, let's say farmland. We're in rural Iowa, right? So farmland is a very common one. If you pass farmland on to, let's say, your kids, then they get what is called step up and cost basis, which means they don't have to pay any taxes on that gain that you had as the owner.
Okay.
When they sell it. As long as, let's say that the farmland's worth $10 million. Okay. When the kids receive it, if they sell it for $10 million, they don't have to pay any taxes. If they sell it for $11 million, now they have to pay tax on only $1 million in gain.
That's where that step up goes.
As opposed to the gain that you had when you passed
Now,
away.
what happens to the kids when they get the property in the first place? Do they have to pay something on that too, or not?
They don't have to pay inheritance tax.
They don't have to pay inheritance
in the state
tax
of Iowa.
Oh, right. Okay, I
And
didn't know
there's
that.
also this thing called death tax, and that exemption went up to over $10 million for a single individual. And I'm sorry, $11 million for a single individual and $22 million for a married couple. So in the state of Iowa, there's not a lot of that type of tax if it's done appropriately. One of the things that there's a lot of confusion around is this thing called probate court.
Right.
When do your assets go through probate? How does probate court work? And if you want to, how can you avoid it? There's a couple strategies you can use.
Okay, so let's go back to your first point. This isn't always an easy conversation because you are thinking of maybe times you don't want to be thinking of, but let's talk about how important it is to put a plan in place. If you're not listing beneficiaries or anything like that, where does your stuff go? Why is this such an important thing to think about?
Yeah, there's usually two different types of mindsets when it comes to legacy. Some people say, you know what, I'm gone, kids are adults, it doesn't matter. The money goes to them, whatever happens, happens.
Right.
And then there's other people who say, I want to make sure that I leave a certain amount. I want to make sure that I can pass something on to my kids and my grandkids, and I want to make sure that it stays within the family line. Depending upon what mindset that you have, there's different strategies that you will want to put in place. But there's not anybody that I've met yet that says, when I pass, I don't care how my assets transfer, if they're transferred inefficiently or they get caught up in a court process. So whatever you have left over, most people at least want it to go in the most efficient way with the least amount of taxes.
You can't really just say let somebody else deal with it. I don't have to worry about it anymore. That doesn't happen very often.
Ideally not. I mean, we do run into a number of situations, unfortunately, where it's a lot harder to transfer the assets than it otherwise would have been if the accounts would have been titled appropriately.
Now, how early in someone's career should they start thinking about this?
I'd say as soon as you set up investment accounts, make sure they're titled the right way. As soon as you own a house, make sure it's set up the right way as far as a titling. If you have minor kids, then it's important to make sure that it is specifically spelled out in a written document, like a will, on who is going to take care of your kids if you do pass prior to them reaching age of majority.
Okay, so let's go back to some hot topic buttons that you've mentioned here. You've mentioned will, you've mentioned probate court, you've mentioned some different things. How do we know which direction to go? Because we always bring experts in talking about various things, and we've heard now maybe you don't need a will.
Well, it depends on what types of property you want to pass on. One of the things with a will that a lot of people don't realize is if anything that goes through the will process goes through probate court. Now in the state of Iowa, there's a 6-month minimum time frame it takes items to transfer through the probate process. Also, if the probatable assets are above $25,000, the estate has to hire an attorney.
Oh.
And in the state of Iowa, the attorney can charge up to 2% on the value of the estate.
Really?
Right.
And court costs, say another 1%, so that's about 3% in costs just to
you're already
transfer
losing.
assets to the next generation. That's
So
right.
some people are saying now, why do I bother putting a will together if it's still going to go through the probate court?
So if you want assets to transfer outside of probate, now you can incorporate a trust.
Okay.
So if you incorporate a trust and retitle, let's say your home, retitle your home into the trust, now it bypasses probate, goes direct to the kids or the beneficiaries you want to go through.
Oh, it does.
And you don't have to worry about the 3% cost, the 6-month minimum time frame, as well as it is a private transaction. Anything that transfers to the next generation through the probate process, it is completely public because there has to be 2 public notices, whereas things that transfer through the trust are private transactions.
So would it be in someone's best interest to put their home, for example, into a trust situation?
Many times it is, and sometimes it's not.
Why wouldn't it be? Why would it not be?
A lot of estate planning attorneys, because there's an upfront cost to setting up the trust.
Okay.
And in the state of Iowa, usually attorneys will charge you $1,500, $2,500 to set up just a basic trust. So there's that upfront cost. So a lot of estate planning attorneys will say, well, if the value of the home is $300,000 or less, then you may not want to incur that cost. But it's an easier way to transfer the assets. It can be a more cost-effective way to transfer the assets.
Got it.
Now, the other thing is, how do you title your bank accounts? How do you title your bank accounts, your checking, your savings accounts to bypass probate? Because most of the time, those are set up where you pass and it's going to go through probate. So what you need to do is put on a POD, payable on death. Doesn't cost you anything to do that. Go to the bank, they have their form, and put beneficiaries on them, and then those assets will also bypass probate.
They will. And are those assets, are those taxed? I'm big into the tax thing because I know how much taxes are tagged onto everything. Are those taxed when they go to the second person?
They are not.
They are not.
They are not. So any of the gains that you have, if you have a $5,000 checking account, you have a $1,000 gain, it's not taxed when it passes over to the next generation.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Now, are these things you're working with your clients on if they're looking to leave a legacy? I imagine it also kind of depends on the assets that you're looking to transfer to your kids or family and beyond, or maybe leaving a legacy in a different way in a community that of a charity or something like that. Are you able to look at every single thing to make sure everyone has everything covered?
The legacy planning piece is one of the first pieces we tackle because
Really?
you just never
Why?
know. Because it's not that hard to set up. And once it's set up, you can leave it the way you set it up for a number of years unless something substantial
And then how
changes.
difficult is it to alter it? In case you want to set it up for a plan right now.
It can be as simple as just changing the name on a beneficiary form. Or
And can that be done online or just give you a phone call? Or
yeah, our families will just give us a call.
Okay.
And then we'll take care of it. We'll need a signature, and it's pretty easy. So it's not that difficult. And this is the thing is that, again, you just never know. You never know what craziness in life happens.
Right.
And if you already know what you want to have happen to your assets when you're gone, set it up the right way, because if something crazy happens, you know at least that your
It's
assets will
taken
transfer
care
how
of.
you
just
want it.
another component of all the services you have to offer. This is amazing. This is fascinating.
It interests
Yeah.
me that this is one of the first things you tackle when it comes to your retirement planning, and that's what you guys do so well. And you hold workshops, brand new beautiful space up in Grimes. People need to come and check out. Remind us how we can find you. If we want to start this conversation or maybe use this as an example with our family members saying, hey, you know what, I saw this on Iowa Live this morning. Let's have this conversation. Let's get this in place.
That's the hardest part about all this retirement planning is how do you get started?
Right.
How do you get started?
Yeah.
We teach a class. It costs people absolutely nothing to go to. It's called our Passport to Retirement class. Then go to merkelretirementplanning.com to sign up for that class. And we hold it at universities around the metro here, Simpson College, Grandview University, DMAC, etc. And it's about a 2.5-hour class.
You do them a couple times a month, don't you?
Yeah, we do a couple times
Yeah.
a month. And we just talk about all these planning components, the estate planning, the income planning, tax planning. That's a big one, Lou.
Exactly, yeah.
All these different things to help you get started building your retirement plan.
I love that.
And I know at times it's difficult for some people to think about, things like this, but you really need to sit down and say, okay, what do I do if this happens? So great. Thank you so much. We learned a lot here today.
We did. It's all about leaving your legacy. Make sure you're doing it in the right way. Contact them, merkelretirementplanning.com.